We have studied that acids and bases may be either strong or weak and have compared to their relative strength on the basis of their ionization. Okay, so according to the ionization capacity, we defined acid and bases. How we define a substance that when dissolved in water produces the H plus ion as the only positive ion solution, or produces as H plus ion, we call it as acids, and the substance that dissolved in water produces OH minus ions, we call it as bases. And we have differentiated strong acid and bases on their ionization capacity. How we define a strong acid or base will completely dissociate in water. Okay, and a strong acid or strong base will dissociate or ionizes into its ions. In acid, what is the type of ion produced? H plus ion. When it is, and in base, it is OH minus ion. When it completely dissociates as H plus or OH minus ion, we call it as strong acid or strong base. HNO3 is dissociated into H plus and NO3 minus. NaOH is a base. When it is dissociated, it changes into Na plus and OH minus. So these are the two substances. One is a strong acid and another one is a strong base. So it completely dissociates. That's why it represents a single arrow. What is a weak acid and weak base? A weak acid or weak base will partially dissociate in water. It will not completely dissociate, partially dissociate. Only a few number of H plus and OH minus is dissociate or ionizes. So we cannot say that it is completely dissociate. A partial dissociation takes place. The partial dissociation we represented in double arrows, that is, this is acetic acid. When it dissociates as H plus and CH3OO minus. Here H plus hydrogen is remaining there. That means it is not completely dissociated from this substance. Only a few number of H plus ion is dissociated. In another base, ammonium hydroxide, it dissociates as NH plus and OH minus. NH plus and OH minus. That means it is completely not dissociated. That is, it is partially dissociated. OH minus, here hydrogen ion or H plus ion is remain. So that means it is not completely dissociated. It is partially dissociated. So according to this dissociation, more the number of H plus ions released by the acid in water, we call it as stronger acid, and the more number of OH minus ion released by the base in water, we call it as stronger base. Similarly, if the number is reduced or if the number is less, then we call them as weak acid and weak bases. So now we are going to discuss some ways or means to compare the relative strength of acid and base. We know that when we studied the identification of acid and bases, when we dip a litmus paper into the acid or base, it shows color. But we can't identify, or we cannot identify how the strength of an acid or a base, whether it is a weak acid or a strong acid. If we put litmus paper into hydrochloric acid or carbonic acid, it shows the same color, that is, blue is changing into red. Similarly, if we are dipping base into a red litmus paper, that is, whether it is a sodium hydroxide or a ammonium hydroxide, it shows the color red to blue. But from that color change, we can't identify the strength of acid and bases. There, in 1909, Sorensen devised a scale known as pH scale. Sorensen devised a scale known as pH scale on which the strength of acid solution as well as the basic solution could be represented by making use of the hydrogen ion concentration in them. So how he devised that apparatus? From the ionization capacity, from the production of H plus ion concentration. With that, he identified the strength of acid and base. We know that in acid and bases, we can see the H plus ion. Okay, but the concentration is more in acid and less in base. Base also contains H plus ion because water is added. There also we can observe the H plus ion, but the number of OH is more than the H plus. But in acid, number of H plus is more than the OH. So here he devised or he made a scale which represent or he make use of the hydrogen ion concentration in them.